Thomas Tuchel is our manager. Did we panic?
Thomas Tuchel was a short-term solution. In an ideal world, you want an English coach. I'm surrounded by the golden generation on the training pitch in Germany, basically saying to me, what are you going to do? But you can't control the behaviours of absolutely everybody. When I assumed the managing director role, the wives and girlfriends never travelled anymore. Everywhere David Beckham went, it was just unrelenting.
Adrian Bevington, welcome to the Fozcast.
Delighted to be here, guys. It's an honour.
You're looking $1 million, mate.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
You are. Right, we're getting straight into it, okay? 17 years you spent at the FA, okay? 17 years. You were there when the England DNA was announced in 2014. Fast forward to today, 2026. We've just finished the World Cup. Thomas Tuchel is our manager. Does that fly in the face of the England DNA, and did we panic by hiring him as manager?
Very good question. I think Thomas Tuchel was a short-term solution, post Gareth Southgate, who I'm sure we'll talk more about. Obviously an elite manager, and they needed someone to step in to take us to that next level that had been talked about, i.e. winning a competition. Unfortunately, you can't guarantee that. He did get to the last four, as we know. I don't think it completely deconstructs the DNA project, because that's about developing players, coaches, all the way through. In an ideal world, you want an English coach who's come through your system. I would be very concerned if, after Thomas Tuchel, they went for another foreign coach after that.
You've been there when Sven was manager, Capello. Does it work having a foreign manager?
Just to caveat, no foreign manager has ever won a World Cup.
That was going to be my immediate reaction to that, my first response. And having been through that cycle and seen, the good, bad and indifferent of it, I would much prefer to see an English coach. And I say English because, we can say British coaches, but ultimately the Scots are trying to find a coach for Scotland at the moment. Are they going to appoint a Scottish coach, a British coach, a foreign coach? I think you saw with Gareth, and he isn't a highly intelligent guy, but you saw how much he got it. And I think you saw previously, I'm going to go back all the way to Terry Venables, how much he got it. And I'm not sure that a foreign coach will find it as easy to understand every aspect of what our playing mentality is. And it's not as easy as that, obviously, not as simple as that, I should say. So I would like to see English coach moving forward, but I do understand why Thomas Tuchel's got it, and he's a ballsy guy. He's not a shrinking violet. We saw that in the build-up to the World Cup. I don't think any of us would necessarily have agreed with every decision he took in the build-up, but you have to, I think when you appoint someone of that stature in the game, you have to let them go with it. And my experience of that would be, say, with Capello, where, he's someone who had won everything coming into it. And you realise when you're in the room with these people, actually their level is just, and their self-value is so high as well, for good and bad.
Yeah.
And you know
Capello,
about that. You know about that. I always feel with Fabio, and it's intriguing when you talk about Fabio, including with people like yourself who've been in the dressing room with him. I spent the first 18 months really closely working with him, often travelling into games and meetings all around the country, and I managed to develop a really good working relationship with him, where I saw a much softer side, a lighter side. I think when he went into the team environment, I think the language really was a problem for him there, and I just think he never really got over that, which was a mistake on our part, including myself at the FA, not to foresee that.
Do you think Capello was a mistake?
No. And I say that, people will be saying, of course he was. The reason being, you have to remember where we were after we lost to Croatia at Wembley in 2007.
It was McLaren, wasn't it? Yeah.
And Steve, it didn't work for Steve, and I've got a great deal of time and respect for Steve as a guy. I was actually messaging with him yesterday. We, as a federation, had to be at the next World Cup for every reason, for football reasons, but also commercially, we had to be at the next World Cup. So therefore, we had a very narrow list of managers that we were going to go to. And I think back in time, I'm going to say it was Fabio, Jose Mourinho, I think Martin O'Neill, and I think Carlo Ancelotti, or maybe Marcello Lippi with a name.
That was the shortlist.
That was the shortlist.
I love it. That's the best shortlist I've ever heard in my life, by the way.
And that was it. And there was 4 of us working on it. Because I remember we had to fly immediately. I think the day after we got beat, we had a series of press conferences which were not easy. And the following day, I think Brian Barwick, the chief exec, and myself, I think we flew down to South Africa for a workshop or a conference. And obviously the world's media were just chasing us down. And there was Trevor Brooking on that panel as well that reported into the main board and a couple of other people. But we just decided very quickly we have to have someone who is elite, and it didn't matter where they were from.
So at this point then, is it left to you guys to ultimately decide who is going to be the next England manager? Like who finally gets the say? Who's the one person?
Also, Ben, I guess in our heads we're saying the fans are of the mentality of we should be winning World Cups, whereas at the time you were saying we just need to be at the next World Cup.
I think we'd gone through that sort of period where obviously we felt we were one of the best teams in the world for that period from, say, 2002 to 2006, where we were pretty close. I know we didn't get through the quarterfinals with penalty shootouts, but we lost to a top-class Brazil team in 2002. We were very unlucky, I think, in 2004 with Wayne's injury. He didn't get injured in that quarterfinal. I'm convinced we win that tournament. 2006, there was a lot of good teams in that tournament, and we just didn't quite get fully going, but actually played really well in the quarterfinal against Portugal with 10 men. I don't think we were anywhere near as strong under Steve, and we had a lot of players out with injury during that period. You remember, I think even the games we played away in Russia, which we really got stitched up in that game where they made us play on an AstroTurf pitch in a freezing cold night in Moscow. Steve didn't have the regularity of the players available to him through injury that Sven had. And obviously people were getting a bit older by then as well. So it wasn't quite the same team. So were we still aspiring to win the World Cup in South Africa? 100%. We still thought we had very good players, but we thought we needed a world-class manager to take us to that position. And who makes the decision? Well, there was the chief executive was empowered by, who was Brian Barwick at the time, was empowered by the board to go out and come back with recommendation. And Brian brought myself on with Trevor Brooking and one of his other colleagues onto this panel, and we quickly reached that group that we talked about. We actually brought Fabio into the country without anyone knowing and met him. It was brilliant. I loved it because everyone kept saying, "Oh, it'll all leak," and it just didn't leak.
Where did you meet?
We brought him into City Airport.
Yeah.
I met him at City Airport. We took him into Wembley underneath, had a meeting at Wembley for 2 hours in an executive box, and no one knew.
How much do you have to plan?
I loved that. That for me was like,
how much do you have to plan that, Adrian? Like the press side of it, and I guess the sneaky tactics.
Well, look, in the end, you can't become. I think I probably was obsessed by it during that period because I was heavily involved in the communication side, but really that shouldn't be your driver. It's about going to the best lengths possible, as professionally as possible, to get people in and out privately. There'd been that circus when Steve McLaren got the job, and there'd been loads of interviews where big-name managers were being ferried into some millionaire's house in the countryside somewhere, and there was helicopters above watching it, and I'm in the office at Soho thinking, this is just not great luck at all. And it's not good for the managers who were then... Everyone knows they've been interviewed, whereas we wanted to do it really clandestine. There was a conversation as well with one other of those managers, a big name on that list, who in the end decided not to go with it. And Fabio really had impressed in the meeting that we had, and the only question mark that was only ever there was with Fabio was his English. Then you go to the board, and it's up to the board to decide as a collective, are they willing to sign that off or not? And in most cases, once a chief executive has made such a strong recommendation, if that's the process, the board will go with it. Will go with that. You've got to agree the finances as well, obviously.
Do you listen to the public perception much? Do you disregard that, and you have to think as an organisation?
I think I'm pretty clear in my mind that when it was that period in 2007-08, we were so strong in our mind with what we wanted that it was not something that we needed to be overly concerned about. Yeah. And to be honest with you, people forget this, when Capello was actually appointed, and even like we kind of think it became known 24 hours, 48 hours beforehand, which we were comfortable with by that point because we'd already got the thing sorted out. He was kind of applauded in, which is where you want to be for any manager, club or country. You want to, in ideal world, you don't want to be coming up pushing a rock up the hill, do you?
Well, listen,
been there before as well, by the way.
When you rewind back and Capello walks through the door, why would he be anything other than applauded?
It was I remember at the time it was a massive coup, really, wasn't it? It was a coup for England. We'd already had Sven, so that ground had been broken already.
Yeah.
And Capello was like, right, we mean business now.
And even people like Sir Alex Ferguson, he was very respectful of Fabio because Fabio has got that personality that we know is a very strong personality. And he'd been a winner with the Milan team, which is regarded as being one of the top teams of all time. But then he's gone to places like Madrid and done it there as well. He did it at Roma. So it wasn't just he's done it with a great set of Milan players. He did it with Roma, who don't often win the league. He did it with Milan consistently. He beat that great Barcelona team that Johan Cruyff had. So it did feel that we were getting someone who was, top level. But all that time, I have to say, there's always that thinking, we are bringing another foreign coach in, but we've got to be at that World Cup in South Africa, which a joyful experience that was.
Can I ask what a manager's interview looks like? Is he getting a PowerPoint out? Is he telling you about what formation he wants to play, what players he wants to play in what places?
So I've interviewed probably around 20 managers in my life in club and country. And it's very different, and it depends who you're interviewing, what the job is, and who you're interviewing for. So sometimes I've appointed as part of a club board, or I've been part of a consultancy process where I've been brought in purely for the recruitment. With a Capello, you're not getting a PowerPoint because in reality is the minute he's walking in that room to meet you, unless that goes wrong or you can't agree financials, he's getting the job.
Yeah, okay.
You're not asking him to show you how you're appointing Fabio Capello because he's Fabio Capello and his CV.
We need him more than he needs us.
That's
basically.
the reality of it, and you do see those appointments being made, all the time where you look and think, well, I can see why that appointment's been made, and that manager could easily walk away from that because the club really needs him or the country needs him at that point.
So at what point does a manager's stock, almost, or reputation go from? So if you were at England now and you're bringing in a young under-21 coach or 17s, I would expect how there's a DNA, but how they're going to operate a presentation. At what point does a manager earn the right to walk into a room on his own without a notebook? Like, for example, Eddie Howe now, if he was going to be interviewed as the England manager.
It's all changed. I think
it's all changed as well. And I would say what I would expect now, as someone who is not technically qualified as a technician, but been around it for 30 years, I would advise the process to be that you say to the manager or managers that you're seeing, we'll have a 15-minute, 20-minute presentation of how you are going to play this team.
Yeah.
Or who else you're going to bring in and how they're going to play and what it all looks like and fits like. Remember, you've possibly got 2 or 3 other people in the room who are not technical people, and after 20 minutes, you're going to, quite frankly, lose them in that conversation on many occasions. So that's probably enough. You get some guys turning up and they genuinely have the most detailed 1 hour long presentations, and it just doesn't work.
Are you taking everything into account here? You're taking if he can hold you in his hand whilst he's talking to you, his people skills, personality.
Again, it depends who's interviewing. I've kind of led interviews with owners of clubs at all different levels, or in federation on a couple of occasions as well, away from England, where I want to get a feeling more than anything else as to how this person operates. And I've interviewed for women's teams as well, I might add. It's good to get a feel for how they're going to improve the players they've got, but it's also then about how does your timetable look like? You want someone who you can see as someone who's going to prepare properly, and they all do this. But and it's things like I would ask a question. So the team loses, you've got your month ahead plan. You've got yours, so you set it all up with your family. So you know that you're off on whatever day next week, but you've had a stink of a result, and then you get called in the next day because the manager's got the and it's like an old school approach.
Punishment.
And that is punishment, but that actually then has a massive detrimental effect on families who maybe have set their week up to work around that. I know this might not be what fans all want to hear, but I think it's far better to have your plan and say, no, I'm going to stick to the plan, but I'll deal with the players in how we work the following week, and we'll address the issues, because if it's an unacceptable performance or individual performances, there's ways that we go about it. And I think you're looking for a level of emotional intelligence, more importantly than ever before, in how managers, which is probably the hardest job in football, in my opinion, undoubtedly, how you manage an increasingly complex group of players within a squad. You can't manage them like you did 20 years ago. It's different.
It's so interesting, because I spent obviously 4 years at Watford towards the end of my career, and we knew that regardless of who the manager was, if we lost on Saturday and we had already had the rota for the month, for the week, for example, and we knew that we might have been off Sunday, Monday or something, because we had a backlog of games we got through. We knew that if we lost on Saturday, we are definitely in on Sunday and Monday. The days off have gone. And so that emotion would feed down from the owner, and the manager hasn't got a say in it.
But it's you're right though, Adrian, because I think a lot of fans will go, hey, well, they shouldn't lose on a Saturday, but you're going to lose games, aren't you? But you're the first guest we've ever had in, actually, that has used the words emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And it's the same, we've talked about it so often, it's the same as a football club, as it is in our podcast organisation, as it is. You're dealing with people. And if all of a sudden your missus is giving you grief because you were taking the kids to the zoo, because the owners had an emotional reaction.
But if you think about this, right, when clubs sign a player, or even when players are at a club, you'll have people in the club, whether it be the football liaison or the club secretary people, who do so much to look after the players. They're unbelievable in the support services they provide. And they've got all these lengths on a regular basis to make, because the managers will say, we want the families happy. Managers send flowers to wives, or, kids get invited to go to certain things. But then on an infrequent basis, you go on this emotional roller coaster. I don't think there's a correct answer to this, but what I would say is that, again, I'm going to come back to Gareth Southgate on this, because it's a big part of how I have observed football managers and coaches in my working life. His emotional IQ is off the chart. Yeah. And I think that's the reason he got so much out of England.
Can we talk about Gareth Southgate then?
Yes, please.
Right. How did Gareth Southgate get the England job?
So if you may remember, obviously he finished playing and went into Borough and did, I think, 3 years and a bit at Borough. Kept them comfortably in the Premier League for a few years and got to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. So it wasn't all bad as often as being portrayed in later times. There's a lot of change going on at Borough at that point as well. Anyway, he leaves Borough when they're in the Championship. And Trevor Brooking, who is one of the most selfless people I've ever experienced working with in my life, a really wonderful guy. Yeah. All the platitudes you hear are true. And I was very fortunate to travel all around the world with Trevor. And Trevor always looked on Gareth, I think, as someone who would be great to get into the FA. And with a few other people, a lady called Danny Avery, who's involved with PGMOL now, she was in FA Learning at the time. I was a big champion of Gareth, always was, from the very first time I met him. And it was like, well, how are we going to get him in? What are we going to get him in to do? And Trevor, I think, basically saw a path that he could potentially replace him at some point. He'd have to confirm that. But more importantly, Gareth came in as some kind of head of elite development or something like that. And again, selfless during that period. I watched him give himself to the organisation, where he would be at town hall meetings all over the country trying to educate or propose why small-sided football should be introduced at under-9s now.
Gareth?
Yeah, this is Gareth Southgate once he joined us. Now, this is not the normal behaviour of someone who's been an elite player with 50 England caps. And, this is Thursday night in Crewe Town Hall or Chelmsford Town Hall. This is what he was doing within that job. We went out to Brazil when we had the period when Capello had gone before Roy came in. And Gareth came out with us. Sounds really glamorous, but this is the reality. You fly out there, and for 6 days, you are literally budget planes, hop back and forth into different cities, look at a training pitch, look at a hotel, look at a training ground. What do you think? And all you're doing is collating information. That probably helped Gareth with his journey. He then decided, I'm going to say after 18 months, to move on. But then when Stuart Pearce left the organisation as the under-21 coach, Dan was in by then as well, Dan Ashworth. So Dan, Trevor and myself led a recruitment process, and I'm going to say around about 10 coaches were interviewed, and some really highly credible, good coaches, I might add. Gareth, for me, knowing how I knew him, and I'm not his best mate in the world, but I'd spent time when he was a player. We'd talk about a lot of different things at breakfast or just on the phone about things. The cultural piece for me was the big thing. I knew we'd never got the culture bit right with England during my time there, of which I was part of, and I just felt I don't know how good Gareth Southgate is going to be as a tactical coach, but what I do know is I think he's got such a smart, emotionally intelligent mindset and understanding of, he's just so good with people.
Yeah, he is.
I want him in the organisation. We've got to give him the chance to get that opportunity. And we reached the situation in the end where that was the agreed approach, and we went with Gareth. And
did you ever, even at this point, envisage him going on to be the England first team manager and having such a successful long career with them as well?
Did I envisage him being the England first team manager? I hoped he would, right? Did I foresee what he would achieve? No.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anyone could honestly say that's what they expected to achieve. What I would say is, back in 2009, I think it was 2009, Sir Trevor, did a media briefing in South Africa at a workshop we were doing with the British media. And he said we were in for a difficult 5 years ahead because we didn't have the depth of players that we'd had in the previous decade coming through. But he did say, in the latter part of the decade, I'm confident you will see some really good players emerging, etc., etc. And he foresaw, again, I can't say he foresaw exactly how it would play out, but what he said that day, I think it was in Cape Town, it resonated with me because every time I saw, Steve Cooper doing brilliantly well, Steve Cooper was I think a Dan Ashworth appointment with the under-17s with Gareth, and Steve fitted into what they were trying to do there, and it's like we suddenly had some really good technical players that had come through the system, part of the DNA process.
And is that from a grassroots up? Like you were talking about Gareth and small-sided games?
I would say that would be too early for that impact to take place. I think, there's two or three things. I think the clubs and the leagues, the Premier League and the EFL, deserve a lot of credit for the elite triple performance plan that was integral to developing players and producing high standards of coaching within the whole of the game in this country. And there was definitely a focus from, I'm going to say 2008, I stand to be corrected after we'd not qualified, on trying to produce more technically gifted players who were comfortable with the ball, like a Xavi or an Iniesta, because I think Spain at that time were just coming through as the top boys. That was the technical opinion. It's rather ironic after the last World Cup that we're still having this discussion about we've got players who can't keep the ball. I would argue that players like Cole Palmer and Phil Foden can keep the ball.
They're not bad.
But that's a slightly different conversation. But this was all part of that genesis. So Gareth got the gig. Did I foresee it?
Yeah.
Couldn't foresee the exact outcome. Did I believe he would change the culture? And just to take that one bit further, I left the FA at the end of 2014 into 15. Gareth had already taken the team back into the Toulon tournament, I think it was, which was really important.
For the 21s?
The 20s at the
20s,
time.
yeah.
And it was a good learning experience. And Harry Kane was in that sort of group. I went to see them play one of my last ever games. We played Croatia away, right at the back of beyond somewhere in Croatia. And Gareth and Steve Holland were taking the 21s team. And we beat them 2-1 away, I think it was. And Harry was up front. Team played ever so well. Jack Butland was in goal, I'm sure. Great performance. Davor Suker was sat next to me from Croatia, and he's saying, "Wow, England!" And Kovac, I think it was, the manager of the first team, and they were like saying, "This is a really interesting England team," which is nice when you get those sort of compliments. But afterwards, we were in the airport, small airport, and it was more about the way the players were with Gareth, and they came over. I think it was Jack, might have been Ben Gibson as well, and like saying, "Look, can the lads have a beer?" Just to, it's a quiet airport. And Gareth said, yeah, of course you can, no problem. They went away, and before they did anything else for themselves, they came back and they got all the staff a drink first.
Good lads.
And it was only one drink.
Yeah.
But it's just the premise of, it was a collective. It's just about respect. And that's not a criticism of anyone else who's gone beforehand, but I think it just showed just part of that togetherness. I felt that sitting around the meal table the night before in the meal room, that all the staff that were around the table, and it wasn't a big army of staff, I might add, they were all on a level with Gareth. Everyone could say their piece.
Yeah.
It was nice to see.
Yeah, there's always barriers. It's like you see a hierarchy all the way through it, don't you?
You feel it. And by the way, if you're on the
you
staff,
feel it, yeah.
You so feel it.
Yeah.
And obviously I've been quite fortunate that I've gone from being very junior when I first joined the FA as a media officer, and sometimes the media officer like the last person that people want in the room, to then being technically the managing director.
Yeah.
So, culturally, it's like when you're not feeling fully part of it, yet you're still working at full tilt every hour of the day for the benefit of the organisation, that's not a good culture.
No. This is my problem with Capello. I can't lie. I felt any time we were there, everybody was so petrified of him, and I could smell it from the top all the way down.
Yeah.
And I saw the way that everybody just tread on eggshells no matter where we went. And I think that's quite healthy to have to an extent. You've got to be a little, I think it's good for young men to be a little bit wary and afraid of the manager, but to an extent. Whereas that was just too much.
But you said earlier on when we were chatting before the podcast that you like a manager.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the dad, isn't it? They're great.
Yeah.
You love your dad, but there's a little bit of fear.
Yeah.
Whereas you said then you like the coaches to do the work.
I'm convinced that I could be wrong, but I'm convinced that had English been Fabio's natural tongue, I think you would have seen a slightly softer version of him.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the way he spoke when he called players just by their surnames and things like that, which was unusual in our culture. And he just came from a completely different culture. And I think there was a lot of what Sir Alex has at Man United that we may have saw a bit of in Fabio, because you don't achieve what he's achieved if you haven't got that capability. It isn't all tactical.
Yeah. He had, there's a good comparison there, because Alex Ferguson, same sort of steely exterior, but he was very good at putting an arm around you and just chatting about your family and where you was living and all this kind of stuff. Fabio Capello, whenever we would see you, would come and sit next to you and say, I watched you at the weekend. You made a mistake. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, mate, honestly.
Did he not say, well done?
No chance, mate. He only would ever pick on the negative. To me, all the goalies would always come and say,
Can I just say, watching a game with him was an unbelievable education.
Really?
And I've been really lucky in my life to sit next to a lot of great football people watching games. Without a shadow of doubt, watching a game with Capello is the biggest education. He calls things so quickly. Absolutely.
You just see it.
See it.
Yeah.
I remember watching a game at Man City Arsenal. So it was actually Sven v Wenger. And after about 3 minutes, he's banging. He was very much a physical person, so he's hitting my arm and hitting my leg, and like he's like, no, they're gonna. And he's telling me how the short at the back and all this sort of stuff. Like 5 minutes later, a goal was scored. See,
told you. Right. So how does Gareth change the England mentality then? Because he got the media on side, he got the way that the group were bonded together, and he got players actually wanting to turn up for England, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, look, I can't really give you the full inside on that, to be honest with you, Ben, because I'd left it before he became the senior team manager. He was still the 21s coach at that point. But I know there was a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes at the FA, not just with Gareth, but Dan Ashworth and his team. Obviously, they'd done the DNA. I think people like Matt Crocker, Dave Redding were involved, but many, many other people whose names would not necessarily be in the public. And I think they were trying to find out from the players. I don't know whether you ever spoke to anybody, but I know they did a lot of, private conversations with people through third parties as well to find out what was hindering them. I got interviewed by somebody myself as to why a third party organisation as to why
isn't this working?
Why, and I think I'm not going to sit here and blame the media, because that would be too one dimensional and completely unfair. But I think that was part of the pressure. I look back and I still think it's crazy that on day one you're walking into your first appearance ever in the England team base. St George's Park has been a massive asset for them as well, by the way. It's given them a true home. Yeah. But, the player would arrive for his debut call-up and probably absolutely bricking it inside and walking in, and within 2 hours you've been asked to do the media. Yeah. And I'm part of that process. And it's like, why would you do that to someone? Yeah. But that's how we were geared up. Yeah. And, I've got to take accountability and responsibility for that. So I think what you had, though, in Gareth, look, he'd actually had a pretty good relationship with the media. He understood how it worked. He understood that you had a responsibility to still talk and represent the country and communicate, but I think he also had that capability to put his arm around someone, also trust the people who's got working for him. And I think it's the collaborative coming together. That's he just built an open culture.
He was very good at. So there was always quite a big thing about a certain age of player wouldn't really get into the England team, and I think that brought him and the team a lot of good grace from England fans when they saw young English men, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, 18-year-olds here and there, playing for England on a regular basis. Players were willing to afford them a little bit more.
But there were also, look, there were one of the big things in the DNA, which I remember Mike Rigg, who's at Birmingham now, doing a presentation, part of Dan's team to like Club England board that we were in. And it was all about the amount of caps that the Spanish players had got or the French players had got. Yeah. They were going into tournaments with 50 caps at development level. Whereas we had this history in England where someone would break through and emerge into the Premier League or the old First Division. That's how far we're going back. They'd play half a season, and before you know it, they're in the England team, but they've never got any experience of the international environment before. So it was really a case of not saying you've got to wait till you're 23 to play, but have you been in our structure? And not every single player, but most of the players that came through had come through that system.
Isn't that part of a player development?
Yes.
And then when
sounds
you,
obvious, but it wasn't.
But then when you will go into an England team, right? It doesn't matter if it's 21, 19s, whatever it is. A lot of our players, they've won.
Yeah,
they've won tournaments. They've won World Cups.
Because they were made to play in these tournaments. So, like, say, when Gareth got in, they made a big part of it of saying, no, if you're not with the England team, you're going away this summer with the 20s or the 19s or the 21s to be in a team and understand and what it means to try and win a tournament.
What you're just saying about knowing how to win was one of my biggest bugbears, to be honest with you, when I was still within the FA, because we would qualify year on year for the Under-20 World Cup, often the Under-21 Championship Euros, the Under-17 World Cup potentially, and the Under-19s Euros. And then we didn't have enough players of a quality to stock those teams, and we'd go. And then there'd be cry-offs for various reasons, and then we'd struggle in all of those tournaments. I remember going to one Euros tournament where half the team ended up going to Euro 2000. This was like Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard's generation, Emile Heskey, Rio Ferdinand, Gareth Barry. Really, we'd absolutely romped our group. We were the favourites going to the tournament. We didn't have three-quarters of the elite players playing Italy against Pirlo in the opening game. Strange enough, we got beat 2-0. Then everyone thinks we're rubbish. But actually, if we'd beat them and won the tournament, that would have sent out such a signal that we have got some really great players.
But they've been fast-tracked into the first team or the 21s.
And they didn't always play. Then they'd be on the bench because we'll get experience. But I think it swung to let's win some elite tournaments, not to be at the detriment of the first team because we didn't have the depth. I think that was the issue. But I remember going to Nigeria in 1999 for the World Youth Cup under-20s. And I think we had about 65 cry-offs that tournament in April.
It's amazing because even you look at like James Trafford. What did he went in as number 3, didn't he, with England? But he was never going to kick a football. But actually, despite being a young, unproven goalkeeper for England, he'd been there and he'd with England, our age group, he'd won major honours,
a lot of the young goalkeepers they were all playing in those tournaments. Remember Jack Butland, for example, he was playing, making penalty saves.
So Jack Butland was the goalkeeper when they won the first breakthrough. They won the under-17s, I think it was. And I think I was away with the under-20s in Toulon when they actually won that tournament. But I remember seeing Jack play. I was down in Brazil doing a recce for the World Cup in 2014, and there was another major World Cup workshop on or something, and England under-20s were playing in Colombia in the World Cup. So we just flew across to Colombia. They were playing Argentina in front of about 45,000 people, and the world's going crazy in Colombia for this game. And I'm looking, thinking, well, we're missing quite a few of our players that you'd think. Jack had an absolute worldly game. We drew 0-0, but we didn't lay a glove on them. And you're thinking, is that really where we are?
We're not
really where we should be. Yeah. And I think there's been such a great amount of work being done by the leadership of people across football working more collaboratively to understand the needs of the clubs, to understand the needs of player development, but also to understand and appreciate the importance of those tournaments so that when they do go, they represent the team well and can try to win.
Yeah. When you were away with England with tournaments, what was your perception of the media? Did you know you had to sort of like hold them at arm's length? Were you wary of them? Were you scared of them?
Did you plan for them?
Yeah, we planned meticulously every single time. My first World Cup was France '98 as a media officer of a team of 3 or 4 of us. So it was a much smaller operation then. I loved that tournament, but I was very junior in reality. So I was taking players into press conferences, answering a lot of phone calls, and relaying important stuff onto people higher up to deal with. That's really what I was during that tournament. As it moved on, you would plan, and the plan had gone on for France '98 massively as well. You'd plan pretty much a calendar that is every single day, every hour of every day that fits in and around what the team will be doing. So the team admin would be saying that they're training 10:30 till 12 or whatever. Then there might be lunch. When's the media conference going to be? Yeah, we're having a media conference that day at 2:00 or whatever it is. So it's always built in. And at a World Cup, you've got an obligation. You don't have a choice at a World Cup as to, you have to do so many of them. You build a media centre, and FIFA or UEFA are looking at what you're doing. Would I say I was scared of them? No, I was never scared of the media. I actually enjoyed working with the media. Did I have a lot of confrontation with the media? You bet. Yeah, a lot. Too much.
Did you try and keep them on side? Or,
you try.
Did you try and befriend?
You have better relationships with some people better than others, and that's just human nature. I would say I fought the fight till I was absolutely exhausted in the end. I think it had I don't think it was actually the best approach, because sometimes I'd have been better off letting certain things slide and just keeping myself fresher. And I brought a lot of pressure on myself by adopting that approach. Sometimes you just have to accept that it is what it is. But I think you've got to remember now where we are with social media, that the public can get a much better look at the players and understand who the players are.
Would you be, say if you worked in it now and you were doing that job role for today's modern footballer, would you be waking up every morning thinking, please just don't have said something silly on social media?
Well, you have that, but I think more importantly, it's like you look back in the day, we'd be sitting there at 11 o'clock waiting for the newspapers to drop.
Really?
And I'd be then up at 4 or 5 o'clock. I mean, you can speak to journalists from that time. I would be absolutely on text, as it was then, banging messages out of people, having a go at people, and I'd be on it. I was literally working 20 hours a day, every day, because I was trying to correct anything I saw that wasn't accurate, and we didn't have social media to correct it. And often you're actually arguing, sometimes you might have a really good relationship with the sports editor or the sports reporters, football writers, but it might be a news story, and you're arguing then with the editor of a newspaper who's damn powerful.
Yeah, they are.
And you've got no real right of recourse unless you're going to go legal. You can't go legal every 5 minutes.
How many of them stories that you would wake up to that were in the news were just untrue?
There were. I wouldn't say huge numbers of them. I've got to say, from the football writer's point of view, there was always, nearly always,
Something.
truthfully written.
Yeah.
I think what you struggled with would be, and there are some, let's not underestimate, there are some fantastically gifted writers and journalists in this country. We've seen that recently with how they've investigated certain things. So you can't just put a blanket criticism in that way. But it's when the headlines then got put on top of certain stories. And I remember sitting down. I do remember with Frank Lampard, who I'd say one of the best communicators I've seen as a player. And I worked with Frank with the 21s, and I was very close to him back then. He was the captain. I was so impressed by him, and it was my first job with England, and I was really nervous to do it right. And I used to prepare briefing, not notes for him, but preparation as what questions he'd get the night before. And I was always encouraging the media to come and do the 21s because I felt it would be good prep for them when they went up to the seniors. Similarly with Steven Gerrard and one or two others. But Frank in 2006, when it was a pressure cooker, there's no getting away from that. I think everybody, the players, staff, the coaches, the journalists, everyone's under huge pressure. I remember Frank agreeing to do a briefing it might be for the Sunday newspapers, in effect helping them to have some copy in advance of one of our knockout games. I think that was correct. And I remember halfway through Frank speaking, and he spoke so well. It was just around a table. It wasn't a big top
conference,
table. Yeah, it was just a round table type thing. All guys he'd have done interviews with over the years. And he made a point of saying, look, make sure you understand this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying this. This is the point I'm making. Are we all clear? He said that himself. At the end of the conference, the interview, I wasn't actually sitting with Frank, but I was just observing it. And I went across in front of everybody and said, just for clarity, can we be clear that we're all understanding of the point that Frank's made there and the point he said? I can't remember what the story was. Everyone agrees. So how delighted was I at midnight or whatever in Germany when the angle was exactly that angle that Frank had said don't. And there's a picture I've got at home in my office where I'm surrounded by half a dozen, maybe more, of the golden generation on the training pitch in Germany, basically saying to me, what are you going to do? And putting it on me, not unfairly, saying if your job is to protect us and help us, which is perfectly reasonable. I then had to call all the reporters who were the Sunday guys. A lot of them I knew really, really well. Like some of them, like still friends to this day. They're on the day off because it's gone on a Sunday the following week, and saying, "No, you got to come back." I'm on the golf. I said, "You need to come back now." I said, "If you don't come back now," I said, "I've got to address this with you. And by the way, I need to be seen to be addressing this with you as well, because otherwise, the players who, in the main, most of the players were really good to deal with, and." They found it stressful at times, some of them, but people like Frank was a really, you see him now with Coventry, he's such a competent communicator. He's a class guy.
Yeah. Assholes.
So but please, it's really, I can honestly say that a lot of the football guys that I work with as well, don't underestimate, at times they can be really helpful as well. And they can, they've marked my card to help players and to help agents, and it's important to get that across because it's just not fair to have a one-dimensional approach to it. It's like everyone in the football industry. There's people that you trust and like better than others, and there's some really great guys amongst them too.
I've got to ask you about 2006.
Which was 2006? Germany.
Baden-Baden. 2006. You're director of comms. Yeah. Your house is in order. Right, everything's been managed, everything's planned meticulously. Training camps in the tournament. Quote: "When England wags went wild in Baden-Baden." How do you even this is an external thing, right?
Yeah.
You can't speak to players and go, "Can you speak to your wife?" And
it became.
How do you deal with it?
That was, I think, that was unmanageable, and you could argue, well, we as an organisation shouldn't have picked Baden-Baden. And definitely with hindsight, maybe with some foresight, we shouldn't have done. And I'm looking at myself there.
Was that because it was a good night out?
It was a small place.
Shopping.
It was a small place. It's a beautifully rich spa town. But it's very small, right? And there was only a small number of hotels, and obviously, there was some very famous names among the wives and girlfriends. It was just if someone was putting together a recipe for the perfect cocktail. For everything off the pitch, it was all in that cocktail.
It's kind of posh and Colleen era of sort of wagdom.
I'm not going to go through all of them.
It was Ashley Cole's, Cheryl.
Yeah, Cheryl
Tweedy. It was
it was all going. It
golden
was
generation.
It was just, I mean, that was one where if I was writing a book, that 2006 would figure
a couple chapters.
So how do you manage that? Though? Do you have to just let it?
No, you
play
can't
out?
let it go. No, you can't. You're trying to stay on top of everything you possibly can, and you are talking to everyone on multiple things. And I did have individual conversations with all sorts of people at that tournament, but you can't control the behaviours of absolutely everybody. Yeah. And as things went on that probably would be nothing elsewhere. But because they were there and it was during the World Cup, it just becomes a front page news because you had people out there who were covering it for news, and they've got it. They're under pressure to provide content. And
the problem is you'd have the football on the back, and then you'd have the wags on the front. That's what it was.
Can I just say, without passing any judgment on the wives or girlfriends, when I assumed the managing director role, the wives and girlfriends never travelled anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I just felt that I took a decision myself that we didn't need that going on.
Distraction.
Yeah.
And not everyone will agree with that, but I just felt we had to move away. Now, what happened was we ended up going to South Africa in 2010, and that became extreme.
On the other end of the scale,
side.
Yeah.
I think where we got to with Poland and Ukraine in 2012 Whether you're going to come in at that, I don't know. And then Brazil. Sadly, we weren't there very long.
Yeah.
I felt we got the bounce about right there, where we were in a central place.
Yeah.
I felt the players were able to feel that they were at a World Cup. However we performed on the pitch, I wanted everybody to go home from both those tournaments thinking, we've been at a World Cup here or European Championships. I felt the spirit that we had in Euro 2012 with a team that wasn't regarded as being anywhere near as strong as perhaps 6 years earlier was outstanding. The players looked like they enjoyed themselves.
It's interesting you say that, because Dave Watson, obviously former goalkeeping coach for England, friend of the show, he did 12, 14 in Brazil and 16, didn't he?
I didn't do 16. I was with Wales for 16.
Yeah, and so that's right. Yeah, so Watto did 3, and he said, because we've spoken in great depth about it, and he said everything was right. He said everything was right. Culture, where we were.
Yeah.
He said He said Roy, the lads loved him.
Yeah.
Everything. He said it just didn't happen. Would that be your experience?
It's always my answer is, why didn't it work? And I was like, I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know. We did everything.
It's things like, like the Poland one, even though we end up get drawn to play in Ukraine, we decided on Krakow. And I'll be honest with you, I was up against it a bit even internally, because the decision to put us in a very populist city centre hotel right off the square in Krakow. And I remember, we had criticism of the training ground that we took over, which often happens. There's always a story. We delivered something that was great in the end, and that's a massive credit to the team operations people who are or were absolutely amazing at the FA. And I remember first night we were in our hotel at Krakow, I got called from around the corner where I was staying in another hotel to come back around, because the noise from a bar down the road was extremely loud, and Gary Neville and Roy said, well, if we're having this, we're going to have to move somewhere else if this is every night. And I was like, I had to get the deputy mayor of Krakow to come out.
No.
And they
was the mayor busy?
Obviously that night, yeah. We'd formed a really good relationship, not just myself, but Michelle Farrer from the FA and various other people, security people, really good working relationship with them. And she said, look, we'll find a way. So I think they closed the outside space down while we were there, and it worked, because then the players being able to wander around the square, because it wasn't a venue city, I don't think, Krakow. So the players had a little bit, not of anonymity, but a little bit
freedom.
And one night, it's a Sunday night, and there was, there's the cellar bars and stuff. And I remember walking around, it was about 7 o'clock, and there was games on. And I could hear this like noise and bit of cheering going on. And I went down and popped my head in, and it was actually about 10 of our players, not from one club, right mixture. And they were having a night off, no drinks. It was just like soft drinks, maybe a pizza or something like that. And they were all sat together and I thought, that's actually, it might not be enough to win you the tournament.
No,
but that's what tournaments
you
should
need
be
that.
about.
Yeah, you need
and I
that.
felt so strongly about that. And Brazil, in the end, Rio may not have been perfect because there was still a lot of travelling to do. And but again, I felt you guys would have felt at least you're at the tournament there.
It was such a weird tournament, because obviously it's us, Italy, Uruguay, and Costa Rica. And at the end of it, Costa Rica win the group.
Yeah.
So we finished bottom of the group in the end, but I think on paper you look at it and you go, actually, that's a really tough group.
That's the flag. After the Italy game, that was I decided after the Italy game in the stand that I was leaving the FA after that game. That was the first game, because I thought at that point, we ain't going through now. Yeah. And I've just worked for 3 years, to the point where when you were in Miami, I flew to the training pitch in Rio first, because I had a bit of concern over the pitch just around one of the goalposts on the pitch that I wasn't happy with. So I'd seen it on video and on photographs, so I flew down to make sure that was right for when you guys got there, because I didn't want you guys rocking up and saying, "Oh, the training pitch is garbage."
It's rubbish. No, it was great. The training pitch.
It wasn't the best. It wasn't as good as in Poland, to be fair.
It was a bit of a travel. I think that was probably the only thing.
And Roy wasn't perfectly happy with that. But the thing is, the hotel that we wanted, we were second nation out of the traps for that tournament. Holland had played a game down there, and they got the hotel that I wanted, which was a bit close at the training pitch.
We got the good hotel.
Can we talk about we've mentioned the golden generation of Wags, but obviously the players as well.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Were you aware at the time that you had a special group, and was the expectation to win each tournament during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I was very young myself at the time, and I think I'm the same age as Gareth Southgate, so he was still a player in the 2002. So you knew that there were obviously United had won the Champions League in '99.
Yeah.
And there was other players had come through like Michael Owen, Stevie G, to name but many others. John Terry was still emerging. Rio was obviously at his peak. Sol, we had some very good players. I think Sven it just clicked. He gave a confidence. Not sure how, but he did. Wonderful man to work with.
Lovely guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, lovely guy. And yeah, I mean, I think the Germany game when we won 5-1 in Munich is always the one that stands out. But I remember us beating Greece 2-0 in the June, away from home in Athens, which would have been historically for England quite a tricky game. Hot night, played them off the park. I think Scholesy got 2. And I remember thinking, we're good. You don't know how good you are, but you know you've got a chance, and you could sense the confidence building. And this was the time when David Beckham, obviously, it just went into Beckham mania. We go to Japan, and we're suddenly one of the favourites. Were we one of the favourites? I don't know. When you think about that time, the team we played in the quarter-final with Rivaldo, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Cafu, Roberto Carlos.
Ridiculous.
And we got quite a bit of criticism for losing. Admittedly, when they went down to 10 men the following day, we got quite a bit of stick for that. I'm thinking, that's the margins, that's the quality you're up against. I do think by the time we went to Portugal in 2004, sadly we were missing Rio, and I think that is always a big loss. Someone of Rio's quality, and him and JT I thought were always a great pick. Although Sol was brilliant as well, but Frank Lampard had come through by that point. Stevie G was in that tournament. He'd been injured for 2002, and Wayne had come through.
Yeah.
And
Wayne had a metatarsal injury.
Michael
Owen had one also.
I just felt that tournament was one. We lost to France 2-1 in the opening game where we were 1-0 up. I'd already gone down to the mouth of the tunnel. I was next to the dugout at 1-0. 2 minutes later, we've lost 2-1.
Yeah,
I was waiting to take I was thinking, this will be a great interview to do with... I'm getting the media guys ready to...
There's Zidane and somebody else scored.
There was a penalty and a free kick, wasn't it?
Yeah, free kick, yeah. David James in goal.
Yeah, and then... But we played so well that night, and Wayne had just emerged as like this great talent. And Frank had his first tournament game, played so well. We then destroyed the Swiss, and then we beat Croatia 4-2 in Lisbon and played really well against Croatia. So we go to the Portugal game, and to be honest with you, I did expect us to win that, and we scored with Michael scores after 10 minutes. Yeah. And even though we retreated once Wayne broke his foot, we were 1-0 up with about 8 minutes to go. Then we came back from 2-1 down to 2-2. Frank equalised, which showed a great spirit. I knew I was going to leave the FA after the Italy game because of the despair I felt inside, just the disappointment. That was the most destroyed I was ever.
After the Portugal game?
Yeah.
Penalty shootout?
Yeah.
Was it the Ricardo taking the gloves off one?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh my God.
I think so.
Was
I don't know because we had two with them, didn't we? And I can't remember which one it was, but that was in Lisbon.
That Euros felt like another one that got away.
That was really, because Greece won it. So we had a real chance of winning it. And I just, you can say that Germany 2006 was also a great opportunity, but we were getting results, but I didn't think we ever got fully going. I think the pressure was immense on the group there, and Wayne wasn't fit. We lost Michael against Sweden, where he was out.
ACL, didn't he?
So I think it was. Yeah, it was a real bad one on the touchline.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So we didn't have our,
Was it Sweden one where Joe Cole
screamer?
Yeah. Was it a roller?
I remember being in the pub down the Bedford. I remember watching outside, everyone just going, "Oh my God, it's incredible!" Yeah. What a good time.
So it was a really incredible time to be around that team, and you can always look back and everyone will say, "Well, they never won anything," and they didn't give themselves the Golden Generation title, but they were actually a pretty good group of lads to work with.
Yeah.
I think they gave everything they could to win every tournament. And I think they were learning how to deal with just the whole, circus that went on, the noise is probably the better word to use, that went on around them. I mean, when we were in Japan, I've heard the players talk about it. Thankfully I'm not old enough to remember the Beatles, but I used to ring my parents or speak to my wife and say, this must be what being with the Beatles was like. Because everywhere David Beckham went, it was just unrelenting. It was out of this world. So
If you could drop one of those players from that era into the World Cup just past to get us over the line, who do you think would have been a difference maker?
you can pick a few there, because
You only got one.
I know.
I'm thinking now, actually, and I don't know.
It's an impossible question because I think a fit young Michael Owen at his peak, he always scored in big games in World Cups and Euros, every tournament.
It might be Michael Owen.
Yeah, but then does that mean we play Harry Kane?
But he put us ahead against Brazil. I'm not saying you don't play Harry Kane, but he put us ahead against Brazil in the quarterfinal, against Portugal in the quarterfinal. He scored the wonder goal against Argentina. He even came. I think he even scored in the Euro 2000 off the bench or something like that. But I could be wrong on that one. But so he would be someone you've got to look pretty close. But how can you say,
mate?
You can't?
It's such a good question, right? Everybody, can you? If there's comments below somewhere, put some comments who you would pull out that golden.
Who would yours be, Ben?
It might be Michael Owen.
Mine would be Steven Gerrard, just to absolutely dominate the midfield.
So I'm
what, ahead of Declan Rice?
Yeah.
So I'm going somewhere else as well. If you're throwing that debate up, and so
yeah, you're Declan Rice.
You're telling me where Rio Ferdinand or John Terry. Would they not?
Yeah,
have
but you've only got one.
No,
that's the
this
whole
is the
point of
debate.
it.
Oh no, they both play. Rio and John Terry.
Yeah,
both
Ashley Cole is possibly the best left back I've ever seen.
Best left back of all time.
Yeah, but you're not relying on a left back to win your games.
So I think it's a very unfair question.
Yeah.
It's a good
but that's
question.
what we're here for. That's what we're here for. Could rewind into the English media a little bit. And managing them. Did you ever make it work? Did you ever deploy the dark arts in your favour? I.e., did you ever leak something out or some kind of distraction out there? Did you ever use it to your benefit as a decoy? And I'll give you an example.
Go on, yeah.
Is I felt in this tournament, and Thomas Tuchel made such a hoo-ha about the press and him not being able to see his team sing the national anthem. I thought that was a bit of a masterstroke, personally.
I think that's what he was probably feeling though as well, despite maybe being a deflection accepted. It was very difficult to get. I didn't really want to get into dark arts, if I'm honest with you, and there was a lot of it going on in politics at that point. I felt as the FA, as the England team, it would come back to bite us. Yeah. I think we saw a bit of that. If you remember when Alistair Campbell took the British Lions and there was an issue of photo access or something like that, I can't remember what the exact story was, and that all became a huge story in itself. Everyone finds out everything. And it doesn't mean that you are not, I would have so many meetings with players that were private meetings, and I wouldn't dream of discussing them to this day, where they would come and talk to me about something that was going on, and I might be aware of a newspaper story that was live, and I might pull them or speak with their agent, and there's so many of those that are not football stories. And we would deal with them however we best could. Some never saw light of day, thankfully. Some did, but were managed down. There was very little of dark arts or trading, which did go on elsewhere. But again, I would say that side of it was, again, probably dealing with the news desks and features, showbiz, as opposed to, the football guys in the main. The football guys want England to win, whatever people think about it, and not everyone's relationship is perfect. They are there. They would they would want nothing better than England winning the tournament because they're out there, the tournament, their team is there. They've got copy to write all the time. The hardest part is when you do wheel out the players, which we did. I think that sometimes gets forgotten. And all the big players spoke with England, often more than they did with their clubs during that period. And it's like, then you still get sometimes, I get a call later on from someone saying, we need something more. When you think, well, you just had Wayne Rooney and you've just had X, Y, and Z. So, but that's the nature of the beast. And what I don't want to come here is sit moaning about it. You have to find that balance. And I think social media, taking it forward now, gives you more opportunities to show so much more and the players to be liked more as individuals. But also there is the risk of social media and the toxic nature of social media that comes with it as well.
I guess as well for players, because I'm making presumptions here, but a player is more likely to go on their phone and look at Instagram and see a story than to go and buy the newspaper.
Nowadays,
back in the day, aren't they? It's there. It's right there
It's made
all
it
the time.
easier for the reporters as well, and made it easier for the media. They've got stories on tap. They just have to go through everybody's
But
social
also
media. and then-
the less credible media.
The worst thing would be, so for example, when we didn't have social media, and social media came in when I was still at the FA, but the papers used to get laid out in the hotel, and I used to go down and think, oh God, I've got to move those papers because every player's coming down, and invariably the headlines weren't always helpful, shall we say, and then I've got to go and ask someone else to go and speak to the media that day. I'm like, God, what are we doing with that? I got into a rhythm with Rio Ferdinand, who was always really interested in it, which is quite interesting seeing how his career has gone since. Rio used to just take my key while I was in breakfast, and he'd go to my room and read the papers. So I have all the papers from the crack of dawn in my room, and he'd just go and sit and read them.
That's interesting.
But he never gave, what was good with that is he never would then come back to me and start, going crazy at me saying, you've got to do this. He would just want to understand
it.
what was going on, and it was helpful. Not everyone wants to see it at all, but then you get sometimes where people would be ringing them, friends or family, and saying, you this, that, and the other. I mean, look, one of the terrible ones would be when Rob Green in South Africa, and Rob had it was. I remember sitting in the media team office in the hotel with my colleagues more so than myself, and some of the stuff that was going on that was intrusive to his life, just because he let a goal in a World Cup.
We had him on the podcast. He said they had reporters sitting outside his mum and dad's house. They were just waiting there 24/7 just to try and get a picture or a story or something.
And that's where you see the side of it that I don't think the football guys would want that either.
No, absolutely. How this podcast came to be actually was when we did an episode with Dave Watson, and we spent loads of time for Watto. And I said to him the one day, didn't we? We said, "How did you end up working under Roy? Because you never came across him professionally to that point." So Roy came in. Watto was brought in as a goalkeeping coach. Didn't know Roy from Adam. And I think me and yourself exchanged some messages.
And I dropped a message to you, remember?
I think you said I might be able to shed a little bit more light on that.
I mean, back then, Roy came in with Ray Lewington, and he was having to very quickly build a coaching staff. He had Gary Neville immediately in his mind. He wanted Gary, which was also very funny for me because Gary and I, we'd known each other a long time, but we hadn't always seen perfectly eye to eye, I think Gary would say on that. Thankfully, it's great now.
I don't think Gary sees eye to eye with many people.
So then I had to ring him out the blue and say, and he's like, I meant to say, oh, by the way, can you have a chat with Roy? He wants you to come in. It was like a most surreal conversation. But while that's going on, Roy was very open-minded during that process. He would sit down with, particularly with Trevor Brooking, but also myself to a degree, and talk about a whole range of things because we were preparing quite quickly for the tournament. Ray Clements was the goalkeeping coach. Ray had been there for, 10, 11 years at that point, maybe 15 years even. But he was also head of national team, so he had a wider role as well. And it was really important that when Roy was exploring, is there someone else who works with the keepers, that we were very respectful to Ray as well. And, Ray's one of the best England people of all time, so got to put that out there. I remember a conversation with Roy where it was the Birmingham connection, because Dave's name had come up, and I think it might have been Joe who'd mentioned him, but I stand to be correct on that. But then it was like, well, hang on, Jack Butland, yourself, you'd all worked with him. Yeah. And I said, that's got to be, all you've got to do is ask those
Even
three.
Fraser Forster had as well.
Well, and I remember Fraser Forster, went with Roy up to Celtic to watch a game against Juventus when Fraser was in goal. And that was the first time I think Roy had seen him live for a while or whatever. But it was about speak to the guys and ask them what they recommend. And Dave's name, to my understanding, just came through immediately, and that's how he got in. It was a really simple, we want Dave in.
It was, though. It was brilliant because Roy, I think, obviously first and foremost.
But I remember having that conversation with Roy, probably with Trevor as well, about he wanted to make sure that the goalkeepers had
a connection.
And I just can't remember whether it was Joe throwing it to Roy or Roy asking
I think he would have asked Joe first, being number one. He'd have rung Joe and said, right, who do you think would be good to go? He'd have said Watto. I think then Roy's rung me I said, oh, well, I've worked with Watto, brilliant, great, get Watto in. And then I think obviously he spoke to Fraser, Jack Butland, and because he brought Jack through at Birmingham as well. But again, going back to your point again about Ray Clements, Ray couldn't do any of the serving anymore. So Ray, obviously, he was my first England goalkeeper coach. He had the Achilles problem. Fantastic goalkeeper.
That was the issue with Ray. I remember that was
because he couldn't do the serving anymore. So brilliant goalie coach, lovely guy. He was my first England goalkeeper coach. And then obviously I think going into the World Cup, Roy wanted somebody who could really serve and really get. And to be fair, that was Watto in spades. Honestly, he could slam a ball.
That's
oh
Luke.
My gosh, yeah.
But they both worked together, didn't they? And then unfortunately, Ray got injured. On the warm up ahead of our first game with France in Ukraine.
He did,
I think he snapped his Achilles on the pitch. But Watto came in, and to be fair, it was quite seamless.
Yeah. He's brilliant.
And it was that Birmingham. I always think it's the Birmingham connection.
The Birmingham connection. One of the questions I've got here, which I think people find fascinating, if you walked into a championship club today, what would be the first thing you'd look at to judge whether it's being run properly?
First thing, I think you get a feel for the environment and culture. You can go into other clubs and you just think it feels vibrant. People are positive in the corridors. You can tell. You look at how they are structured. In my mind, how's the academy doing? Is that bringing players through? What is their approach to recruitment? What are the standards like generally? And that's such a glib statement to make, standards, but you know what I mean by that. If you've been in a football environment, you can tell when something's slack or not, and when something's right on point. Meal times are meal times, right? The bus leaves when it leaves. The meeting's when it happens. That doesn't look right, so you've got to make it look correct. The kit's got to be spot on. Everything is absolutely... And you end up becoming the sort of person who can become the proverbial pain in the backside, if you're me, because I'm a nightmare for picking up on stuff like that all the time. I looked at Middlesbrough when they came to Nottingham Forest and I was there. Karanka was the manager, and it was the year they got beaten in the playoff final, I think, by Norwich. And, Forest were pretty threadbare at the time. Dougie Freedman was doing a pretty good job, to be fair, just to keep them, where they were in the middle of the table. Middlesbrough rolled into town. They'd signed a load of players. The club just felt fresh and big. And, I'm not saying they're a big club than Nottingham Forest, but they just felt right at it. And it's like, is your training ground looking sharp or does it look tired? What are the dressing rooms like?
All these things add up, don't they?
So it's not just one thing now. I'm not answering your question directly, Tom, but it's about that feeling. And if you go back to Kevin Keegan, who sadly passed away, obviously, when he went into Newcastle as the manager the first time round, he talked about he got them saved that season, and he went into, and they painted all the dressing rooms that summer, him and whoever got people in to do it, because he wanted the players to realise that things were improving and better. And I go back to when we used to take facilities on with England, and you've had the privilege of travelling around the world with England to games and stuff. I could say pretty confidently that you won't have been to many places or environments with England where you thought, blimey, I'm not impressed with this. Yeah.
Everything's perfect, laid out. It's a standard. It is.
Standards is the key.
People will always they'll tailor what their effort level and what their standards are going to be like to what the environment is.
You also need those gatekeepers around the place, whether it be executive board level like yourself, whether it be club captain, first team coach. You need people at every touch point. It might be the manager of the kitchen. It might like you said, it's every place you go. But if you're at a whole...
It's a weird one, because when I did feel at times with the FA that I felt we'd reached a point where we were doing, can you do too much? But it felt at times like that maybe we just continually trying to do everything. And I heard someone discussing this recently about, in the end, the players also have to think for themselves on the football pitch. Yeah. That's a different, deeper conversation. But then I do believe that has helped me post my FA career, that I understood what really high standards are like. And we've had the discussion there about, we've mentioned Capello and the other managers, but we've also, you talk about David Beckham and Gerrard and Lampard and, all that group. Their standards in training was absolutely on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And testing people all the time, just the way they conducted themselves around the world. They were just top pros. And it's like when I've spoke to young players in particular, when I've been into clubs and spoke to parents at different points as well, and it's like, look, just get that basic standard right. You can't always, until you've actually seen it, you can't really fully appreciate it. But that's what you've got to apply as much as you can and get the very best out of yourself. You look at people like Owen Hargreaves or Scott Parker. They're two names that just jump out at me.
Yep.
That guys that I think they can turn around at the end of their careers and say they absolutely everything.
Everything.
Two individuals that I work with that I'm not like big mates with them or anything like that, but I look at them and I've got so much respect for them.
Yeah.
For what they did in their careers.
Jordan Henderson, you could chuck into there. Same sort of player. Got milked everything, no stone unturned.
And that's what I'd say to any young player. Look at those guys. You'd put Frank in that bracket.
Definitely, would you?
Just, they're the guys you've got to look at.
Put Stevie G in there.
Of course. I mean,
through the golden generation again.
You could go through that group, so I'm not being selective of individuals.
Just we talk about names there, like Frank Lampard and I, like Eddie Howe obviously recently left Newcastle. How do we get these people into the FA, into our pathway? And do foreign countries take the national setup more seriously than we do from a coaching perspective? Like they get them in the system earlier.
I think there's a few different points there.
There is.
I think, first of all, the FA have done a lot of work in the last decade on help. I mean, I've heard people like Frank Lampard talk about it. I think there's been a lot of contact from the FA with Frank as he's gone through his pro licence. I know a few of the guys who've been heavily involved in the pro licence or the other qualifications who worked there a long time or are now in clubs. And there's been a real commitment to identifying people, helping them, anyone who's got any interest to take them through that journey. My concern would be we are still pretty threadbare at the top end if Thomas Tuchel wasn't there tomorrow. That's, for me, part of the coach education development. We may be producing, I don't know, but we may be producing a lot of really good coaches, but to be an elite manager, head coach, it's a different type of personality to do that. You've been in it. And who are those guys? Eddie Howe, I'm sure, could do it. Frank Lampard absolutely gives the signal.
How do we get them in? Because with that career, it feels like the trajectory that's gone.
I don't know whether someone like Frank, for example, would he have wanted to be the under-18 coach? I don't know the answer because he was looking to be a coach with Chelsea or Derby, wherever he's been. And you've Scott Parker, who's done a lot of jobs already for someone of his career. So I think you've got to understand that they want to come and give themselves, quite frankly, but it is part of their education. It seems to be that some countries just produce coaches of elite level, of high numbers, and others are struggling. I mean, you see the Dutch at the moment, they've just appointed Xavi, haven't they?
Yeah.
As national team coach.
Yeah.
And they were looking at Roberto Martinez, reportedly.
The world of football basically has just appointed a bunch of absolute legends, haven't they?
Yeah.
Like everybody seems to have appointed a national team legend.
The Dutch, their heritage is about coaching culture.
Yeah.
They were like pioneers of all of this after we sort of did a bit of coaching in there originally, right? The Spanish, I mean, I still speak to Aitor a little bit. He's the technical director now with the Spanish FA. And, they just seem to, they have a philosophy. They put people in who aren't always household names. Some are not. But they just have this system that works.
But it's trying to tempt them into the system, isn't it?
Almost. I think, look, national team coaching is, it's just not the same rhythm, is it, as club football? No. So you've got to want to do it. Some guys will want to do club football, and then may fancy
towards the end
the England job at the end. I think managing the England men's senior team is, yes, it's tactical, of course it is, but I think it's people management.
It's a different job.
I think it's people management. It obviously is on a day-to-day basis at club level as well, but I think, how can you don't want to appoint a manager who then turns around after 3 months and says, well, I don't know what I'm doing myself because I haven't got the players. Well, you knew that when you took the job. It's like, how do you build that relationship and rapport with the players? How do you build your time so you're not just sitting for a fixture every 3 months, which is a very different job. Roy, when he came to England, even though he'd been an experienced manager, club and country, he's still having to fill his time between when the squad are together because you're borrowing the players. But how do you make them feel that you're players as well? So it's not an easy one to answer. I think they've got to do a lot more work, or we've got to see a lot more output is a better way of phrasing, because there's so much work going on. It's not a criticism, but we need to see more of our top people become elite coaches and managers, where our guys are respected around the world. So clubs in the very big clubs in Spain and Germany and France and Holland and Italy look at our guys and think, we want one of those.
Yeah.
We want those guys in, because I don't think we've reached that point.
And it's difficult. We know with the
Tom, we didn't have a pro license until 1999, 2000.
Right.
We had the FA badge, but other countries were years ahead of us in that regard.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we're still so far, but we're not. When we built St George's Park, which is an unbelievable facility, it's the University of Football. If you quote people like David Sheepshanks who were involved in it, there's a lot more to St George's Park than just developing coaches. There's talent ID, there's player pathway, everything that goes with it. And you look at the success of the women's teams, by the way, which is a remarkable story. But I still think the big ticket for us as a nation is to make sure that we're producing enough high-quality international class players in every position, which I think we go through different areas of the team in that, where we're a bit short in some areas and not in others. But more importantly, we've got to have top-level international caliber managers who can step into that job and feel comfortable doing the job, because they may be great technically, but until you are carrying that burden of responsibility, and we've seen it in our lives, there are some guys who get given a top job and you can see they shrink. They struggle with that level of responsibility and pressure, where you see other guys just deal with it and are comfortable with it. I mean, I've got absolutely no doubt that, say, Frank Lampard, if he was given the England manager's job, would not find that a burden of pressure that he couldn't deal with. I would say similar to Steven Gerrard. I'm looking at Michael Carrick and the way Michael Carrick has adopted Man United in the same way that he did at Middlesbrough. He's doing exactly the same things insofar as how he's dealing with things. He wouldn't be fazed by it. So I think that's a big part of it, as opposed to some people, not just England, but big jobs. You look at them and think, wow, this is a big step up for them, and they've not been at this level before.
Taking back to Middlesbrough quickly. You mentioned some problem positions for England there. One throughout the tournament was right back. Jed Spence you had at Middlesbrough for a little bit. We're going to talk about the how transfers work in a minute. Were you surprised to see that from Jed Spence? Happy for him? Proud for him?
I'm really pleased for Jed. I'm really pleased for the people at Middlesbrough Football Club as well. Jed came in just as I arrived. A guy called Martin Carter, who's still at the club now, I actually sat with him and watched the game, Middlesbrough v under-21s v Hartlepool on Tuesday. And Martin's got an unbelievable talent for picking out players from all over the world and bringing them into the club. So Jed came in. Nobody, I think, could have foreseen at that point where he was going to get to. And obviously he's faced various levels of criticism at different points anyway. But one thing you could never take away from him, he had a lot of spirit, really strong mentality, and obviously he's electric quick.
Yeah.
So that gives him a massive advantage. So I'm delighted for Jed in that regard, and if it is Inter Milan, I hope he can be successful.
Has a nice
there.
time out in it.
I mean, it's just remarkable to think he's made that level of progress. Steve Cooper did a good job with him at Forest, obviously.
How much of a say does a manager have when you and the chairman, other chief execs, want to sign a certain player, but he doesn't want them?
In my opinion, you should never sign a player the manager doesn't want. One, because it's not fair on the manager. Two, because it's not fair on the player.
Yeah.
Right? Because the player's the one who's going to suffer in the end. He's going to find himself not in the team.
Does that happen a lot?
I can't account for what's happening everywhere, because I think you look at every single club, you see some people who are more head of recruitment leaning. You see other people who are, more across the performance services. So you get a different type of person in the sporting director, technical director role. And then it depends on the type of manager coach that you have. My view is the way football is nowadays, I think the perfect situation is if you can sit down when you appoint a manager or head coach, whatever the title, and you agree at the very beginning before you make the appointment, look, this is how we operate at this club. My view would be you never try to impose a player that the coach doesn't want. But your job is to make sure that you are leading a recruitment team that is identifying players that fit profiles that you've all agreed, led by the coach, they want for certain positions, a player type, and you can bring people to the table. Obviously, if you reach a situation where the coach is just forever and a day saying no, 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 and they don't want to engage that way, well, at some point that's going to break, isn't it? Because culturally that isn't working. The good clubs or the good situations with clubs are when everyone comes together and you can disagree. You know, you can have disagreements, and it might be that you end up going for player 3 or player 4 on a list, not because they're fourth worst, but just preference to what the coach wants. And it might be driven by what the salaries are or the transfer fees. But you've got to have a structure in place that you can go to a coach who, if you're in a system where the coach isn't controlling everything and you're actually helping them, you're being efficient in your time, you're using data to sieve to a certain point, and then you're going, I still think you've got to do live scouting because you've got to, I mean, there's clubs like Brighton that would prove me wrong in that regard, but I think you still got to go and look at a player
with your own eyes
to see what they're like in the warm-up, what they're like interacting with their, you know, I remember once going to see Ivan Toney play against Rochdale for Peterborough, and I went and he scored a hat-trick, but it wasn't the hat-trick he scored, it was the fact that watching how he was great. You could see he was very popular with the guys and all that sort of stuff, and I think he signed for Brentford about 18 months later. But so you're not just watching what you'll see on a screen if you're doing it off the scouting tool and so forth. So it's getting the whole blend together, but I think we've said culture and environment so much during this conversation. If you've got that right, and obviously there'll be peaks and troughs during the relationships and the pressures that people are under, but if you've got that right generally, I think you'll get more right than wrong.
I've got a question which I find really interesting, is how, in your experiences and your knowledge, how often does the club as a whole set like a playing style and a philosophy? Because what you'll see is if manager A comes in and he plays a certain style and then manager B comes in afterwards and it's a completely different style, that whole scouting network, the whole coaching philosophy kind of goes out the window, and they starting again from scratch. Whereas when you look at the Brightons and the Brentfords particularly, and you kind of go, that existing pipeline of scouting they've got of, I don't know, 500 players on the list, that will still be valid.
It's not just the scouting, it's the whole support staff. Because in reality, what you don't want to have if you are the owner of a football club and you're the one who underwrites it financially, you don't want every time a manager changes that all the coaching staff go and the medical staff go and other people on the performance staff go and the recruitment staff go, because suddenly you've got to maybe pay a lot of people off, which costs a lot of money, and then you've got to hire a load more in because they're aligned to the manager. Now, I know that's how it's worked historically for a lot of managers in the game, and I'm not sitting here saying they were wrong and I'm right, because there's people far more qualified than me to have that opinion who've been way more successful than me. But I think if you were trying to build a model that was ideal for the modern age, you say you have your recruitment team, your performance services, your medical staff. They're all club people. And the coaching staff, when you go out to market, you're hiring the head coach. The head coach might say, look, I want to bring 3 people with me. I want to bring 2 people with me. It might be my assistant. It might be the goalkeeper coach. It might be the fitness coach, whatever. It might be the analyst, whatever it may be. And you have to agree as a club, are we okay with that or are we not? And then you're into the realms of, so there's the staff, because you don't want islands existing within the operation as well. You want everyone in an ideal world to be together. But I'm not losing sight, by the way, of the importance of the manager in this, by the way, because they set the tone. They've got to get the results. They're judged harder than anybody else. And the players look to them for the management and leadership. So I'm not being in any way dismissive of that. But then the player profiles of players that you go to sign, I would expect that in a significant amount of clubs all over the world, that they have their player profiles that are regularly updated on the computers, that this is what the type of players that we want, that fit our DNA, our identity. When I'm meeting you as the new incoming head coach, we should be having that conversation then. so that there's no surprises. Because if you sit there and say, well, no, it's not how I work, I want full control, this is how it's going to work, bum, 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 you've got a problem pretty quickly, certainly at the first transfer window. It might be, though, that you actually say, yeah, we're very happy with that. You're so good at what you do. We respect you so much. Come in. You improve us. But I think most clubs are looking the other way now.
Yeah, it's changed,
saying,
hasn't it? Yeah.
saying, we want to... But don't get me wrong, I also feel as well, people in all of those other jobs, you also have to be evaluated on your performance too. It's not a free hit just to let the coach keep changing every 5 minutes.
Yeah. Adrian, that was incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend. I feel like we could do a part 2 of that.
Part 2 and 3.
I swear.
Just quickly before you go, are you looking to get back in to club
I'd like
football?
to.
Is that what the...
Yeah, I kind of... Look, football, I can't ever not been with the football. I've been football all my life, and I still go to games all the time. I've been to 3 games in the last week. And I feel a bit wasted at the moment, not being on the inside. I'm not even saying I have to be in control or the number one person somewhere. I'm just want to be back in because I think I can help a lot of people with some of the knowledge I have and experience I have. Not in an oppressive way, but just to... I've seen a lot of things come and go and mistakes made, including some by myself, that can help improve people. So, I want to be in ideally.
Incredible,
Fantastic.
mate. Brilliant. Adrian, top man, mate.
Thank you, Adrian.
Cheers,
Tom,
pal. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. We hope you enjoyed the latest episode of the Fozcast. Don't forget to give us a follow on Spotify. Up the Fozcast.